Broncos have announced their depth chart going into week 1, and to some, there were a few surprises on it. So we're going to go through the entire depth chart and react to some of those surprises that the Broncos had put out there. But let's start in the quarterback room, where we learned Bo Nix was the starter a few weeks ago. That's no surprise to anyone who's been alive for the last few weeks. Jarrett Stidham at QB2 and Zach Wilson at QB3. To some, that's a little bit of a surprise because Zach Wilson played so well down the stretch in the preseason. To me, it's not a surprise. I think this is a textbook example of the difference of playing against the starters in preseason versus guys that are no longer in the league. And unfortunately for Jarrett Stidham, yeah, he may not have had the greatest stat line in the preseason, but he also went up against some good players in the preseason. And no offense to Zach Wilson and his opponents, but when you play guys that were all roster cut candidates on the final day of the preseason training camp, you are going to put up some good numbers. So to me, it's not a surprise that Jarrett Stidham is QB2, but I can understand how people land at that conclusion because Zach Wilson looked so good the last few weeks of training camp and preseason. On to the running backs now. Javonte Williams, RB1, Jaleel McLaughlin, RB2, Audric Estime, RB3, and then UDFA Blake Watson. This is very chalk to me. This is what we expected the whole time. So now we can get excited for Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin, who I think are going to be exactly what the cliche is. Thunder and lightning, right? Javonte Williams, one of the best running backs at breaking tackles, yards after contact. He's a fast-moving bowling ball. Jaleel McLaughlin, he is your lightning, right? He is nimble. He is quick. He is elusive. He is tough to get a hand on. He's a nightmare in flag football. That's a great 1-2 punch. Then you get Audric Estime, who I don't think is going to have a ginormous role as a rookie, but you could see him in some short yardage situations or to help give Javonte Williams a breather here and there. I think there's going to be a very well-rounded running back group. And if you're looking at it from the lens of a fantasy perspective, I think we learned in New Orleans that Sean Payton likes to get a committee backfield going. Now, when you get dealt an Alvin Kamara, that's going to change things, and you're obviously going to feed that guy a ton. But there's no Alvin Kamara in this roster. So I think we're going to see a 55, 40, and whatever the rest of the math is split for the 3 top running backs. Now, before we move on to the next piece of the depth chart here, one last time, an opportunity to catch up to Seahawks today in subscribers before week 1 kicks off. Help us beat them in subs. We win on in the sub battle. It's a guaranteed win on Sunday. That's what YouTube tells me every single Sunday. So go ahead and subscribe right now. If you don't sub, I get a long fax from the folks in San Francisco with everyone that didn't subscribe, and I go door to door, and we can blame you. On to the wide receivers. Courtland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mims, your top 3 guys. Not a big surprise after the move of Tim Patrick. But how about Lil Jordan Humphrey, Devon Vele, and Troy Franklin? The Broncos depth chart, believe it or not, it had Lil Jordan Humphrey ahead of the 2 rookies, which is a little bit of a surprise because Lil Jordan Humphrey isn't even on the roster, right? He's on the practice squad. So for the Broncos just to come out and announce yep, Lil Jordan Humphrey is going to be a no-brainer roster elevation every single week, okay, that I can see. But to just have them supersede and jump all the way in front of 2 guys already on their roster, I think that's a little bit of a surprise. Tight ends now. Adam Trotman, Greg Dulcich, Lucas Kroll, Nate Atkins, and Dylan Parham. Or I beg your pardon. Donald Parham. I'm thinking of the Raiders Parham. Donald Parham. Here are your tight ends going into the season. I think Dulcich, to some, Kroll might be a surprise because he was such a, commonly talked about player throughout the offseason and one of the mini camp and OTA's biggest winners. But for me, I feel like Dulcich coming back healthy has established himself as one of the 2 top tight ends. And if he continues to stay healthy, I don't see a reason why he can't sort of regain that top tight end position. Offensive line now. Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, Quinn Miners, and Mike McGlinchey. Those are your 5 starters. Matt Peart, your swing tackle, Alex Palchevsky and Frank Crum, kind of in like a developmental stage, especially with Bowles entering a contract year. Maybe they want to see if one of those two guys could eventually take over as the long-term starting left tackle. And then Alex Forsythe is your backup center for Luke Wattenberg. No surprises on that front there. It's what we've expected pretty much from like day one outside of the center gig, because that was an open battle for the first few weeks. But Wattenberg kind of emerged as the team's #1 center early on in camp, and he never really looked back. Now, when it comes to game day, who do you think is going to score the first touchdown for the Broncos? Give me a Bo Nix touchdown pass to Lil Jordan Humphrey. I think Lil Jordan Humphrey might have scored the first touchdown last year. Someone fact check me. I don't remember who scored the first touchdown against the Raiders, but I'm going to go with Bo Nix to Lil Jordan Humphrey. Defensive line now. Zach Allen, DJ Jones, John Franklin Myers are your 3 starters, and then Jordan Jackson, Malcolm Roach, and Iyome Wazurike. The only surprise here, I would say, is just the overall presence of Iyome Wazurike. Remember, he missed all of last year because he was suspended due to gambling. Then he gets reinstated, and I was a little surprised to see how quickly the Broncos kind of welcomed him back. I don't know if they would use him as an example of, hey, we're going to throw the book at this guy so no one else ever makes the stupid mistake he did of gambling on NFL games, college games, whatever he was doing, when we know how, frowned upon that is. But it was kind of the opposite reaction, right? They welcomed him back with open arms, which, I like. I'm all for second chances. I just thought they might use him as an excuse to make an example out of someone so that no one else on their team makes that same mistake. But it was quite the opposite, right? They quickly found a roster spot for him despite not playing all of last year and not a whole lot this year, joining the team early August. So super exciting for him to get right back on the 53-man roster where he left off. Linebackers now. Jonathan Cooper, Alex Singleton, Cody Barton, Baron Browning, your 4 starters. Benito, who, by the way, changed his number to 15, and Jonah Ellis are your 2 backup outside linebackers, with Drew Sanders on the PUP list to open up the year. And then Justin Stranad, and then Welch, who came over shortly after roster cutdown day. They moved on from Lavelle Bailey, put him on the practice squad, and added Welch for special teams purposes. I think the linebacker room is somewhat chalky. We saw Cody Barton start to emerge as this team's next inside linebacker with Singleton, and so ultimately they picked him over Jonas Griffith, who unfortunately has to get another knee surgery due to complications from his ACL tear last year, so a real big bummer for him, but hopefully he can find his way back onto the field soon. Cornerbacks. Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, Levi Wallace, Trayman Smith, and Chris Abrams-Drain, the last 3 being backups, with Damari Mathis starting the season on injured reserve due to an ankle injury he picked up in the preseason finale, so he is out the first 4 weeks of the season. I wouldn't say surprised. Riley Moss starting is not a surprise since that was kind of the plan over the last few weeks, and he was starting in the preseason, so that's not a dramatic change or turn of events, but I feel like starting Riley Moss over Levi Wallace is a little bit of a gamble because of the way Levi Wallace played last year. He really proved that he's got a lot of gas left in the tank for the Steelers, and I know Sean Payton's mantra has been, we are going to start the best 11 guys. We're not going to play guys that we think are better long-term if they're not ready right now. And for Riley Moss, we didn't see him hardly at all last season. So hopefully he can, hold on to that starting gig and run with it. But I figure Levi Wallace was brought in last year, somewhat like Fabian Moreau was, who eventually took over from Damari Mathis as this team's starting corner. And I felt like that might have given us a blueprint for, they just brought in another veteran cornerback, and we saw last year how they kind of learned their lesson by just starting Damari Mathis just to start him, and that quickly backfired. So I figured, maybe this year they'll kind of, learn from that mistake last year and start Levi Wallace. So we'll see if Riley Moss is up to the task. Fingers crossed he is, but we really don't have a whole lot on him to go off of. Safeties now. Brandon Jones, PJ Locke, your 2 starters. Devon Key, Keandre Smith, and JL Skinner are your 3 backups as Delaren Turner-Yell opens up the season on the PUP list. I'm excited to see what these safeties can bring us. Without Justin Simmons, it's going to be a whole new look. But Brandon Jones, I feel like, is one of the most middle-of-the-road safeties. He's not going to put a whole bunch of great highlight plays on his reel, but he's also not going to cost you games, which last year there were moments when Justin Simmons was out that literally happened. The Dolphins game, for example. And then as for P.J. Locke, I mean, he's your new Kareem Jackson. Like, he's your new enforcer. He's going to drop into the box. He's going to make big plays, and he's going to make big hits, right? He's going to change this game from being a contact sport to a collision sport. Now, before we get on out of here, give me a bold take for the 2024 Broncos down below in the comment section. The bolder, the better. My bold take, I think rookie linebacker Jonah Ellis puts up 4.5 sacks. 4.5 sacks as a rookie, which might not sound like the spiciest take in the world, but for a backup rookie, I think 4.5 would be an awesome number for him to get to, especially with Cooper and Browning both entering contract years. All right, that will do it for us on today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and I'll see you all on Sunday.